Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2623 of The Tom Woods Show, and we're with our great friend Corey DeAngelis, who is, he's the name associated with school choice in the United States. And that's not an exaggeration. It honestly is not. And it's to the point that the White House knows about it. Now, that's not just from the Donald Trump endorsement of your book, but also for another reason we'll talk about a little bit later. But I wanted to talk to Corey. His most recent book is called The Parent Revolution. What's the subtitle?
Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools.
There it is. You can see, if you're watching on video, you can see it right there in the background. But I want to talk about him about this rather momentous development with the Department of Education. And the thing is, I know everybody listening knows that forever we've been promised by Republican politicians they're going to get rid of the Department of Education. And I think they made that promise thinking this ought to satisfy the dumb rubes. And then they had never, ever any intention of carrying through with it. And now it looks like maybe it is being carried through. So we got to get into a little bit of the technical details of what exactly has happened. But first of all, I have to say, Corey, I think the first time you and I met was it possibly at a Pork Fest panel?
Pork Fest, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just since that time, that was not that long ago, since that time, you've gone from a reasonably prominent guy to like the guy who gets a White House invitation to the signing of the executive order. So that alone is rather an interesting development.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And we should really thank Randy Weingarten and the teachers unions for overplaying their hand and stepping on a rake and showing parents what was happening in the classroom during the COVID era. Like Milton Friedman said, the real change only happens when a crisis, actual or perceived, occurs. And the response to that relies on the ideas that are lying around at the time. And so we had the great idea of school choice lying around at the time, and we've had a lot of momentum on that front. But now, with the Department of Education executive order to abolish it, that's a whole other issue, and it's a big deal.
So what exactly happened on that day? Were you like one of the little girls in the Oval Office the day he signed the thing about men and women's sports? Or, where did this happen and where were you?
Yeah, I was in the East Room of the White House. And so I was able to have my wife attend as well. It was a fantastic event. Donald Trump he signed it in the East Room, and he had behind him children at desks signing their own executive orders as well to abolish the department as he was doing. And it was great advertising or marketing of abolishing the department. I will say that, but I was on the other side of them facing the whole event going on. And they were great. There was big names there. Linda McMahon was like 2 rows in front of me. Governor DeSantis, Governor Bill Lee, my governor, Greg Abbott from Texas was there, and a bunch of others. Governor Reynolds from Iowa. So, it was a momentous occasion. Everybody was really excited. But it is just a first step. And so it basically is an order to say that we should take steps to dismantle the Department of Education and, like Trump says, return education to the states. And that proposal is basically to have the money that's already being spent at the federal level sent back to the states in the form of block grants so they can use it as they see fit on their own state's education system. I think, a better proposal would be stop taking the money from us in the first place. That's the more libertarian approach. But that's the less politically feasible approach. The one that has more legs in Congress right now is a bill from Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican out of South Dakota. That one would block grant funding back to the states, and any useful functions of the department would move to other agencies. So, for example, and it's not really clear whether these things are actually useful, but Pell Grants for college would move under the Treasury Department. civil rights protections at the federal level would move under the Department of Justice. Trump just announced on Friday of last week after the signing that things like student loans would move under the Small Business Administration. So it's a lot of shuffling things around. As libertarians listening to the podcast, you might say, oh, I'd rather just get rid of all these things, but we have to live in the realities of the political climate right now. And so it is a step in the right direction at sending education back to the states and at least getting rid of the department. But I will say, if we do want to erase the department altogether and completely eliminate it, you need Congress to do so. And that's because the department was created by an act of Congress. You need an act of Congress to get rid of it. And in the Senate, we have the filibuster, which means you need a 3/5 majority to stop that filibuster. And so Republicans only have 53 votes. You need 60 to stop a filibuster in the U.S. Senate. So in order to do that, you need 7 Democrats to come along. And I don't have confidence that you'll get 7 Democrats to do that, especially after they voted unanimously against the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, which is an 80-20 issue. So who knows? Maybe they lose some seats in the midterms because of this in 2026. But Trump's basically taking this death by 1,000 cuts until we get there, which is killing it from the inside. And they've already announced they've cut about half of the staff at the Department of Education, which originally had about 4,400 employees. They've already cut thousands. So that's the good news. Oh, we're halfway there, but we're not all the way there yet.
The thing is, you're not even going to notice the difference. On a practical level, day to day, no matter what school your kid goes to, you're not even going to notice the difference. And I say that because I see all over social media people who are legitimately panicked, who I think they hear the words Department of Education and they don't know anything, and they're being panicked by people who are on the take and want to panic them so that they will put pressure on the government to keep the gravy train flowing. But it means that they think a move like this means you're against, quote unquote, education. Because if you weren't, why would you be opposed to a Department of Education? I mean, it really is that at that level. And so they're going to notice that there's no difference.
Exactly. And the Department of Education doesn't employ a single teacher. The Department of Education doesn't educate a single child. And every state already has a Department of Education. Why do we need another one in Washington, D.C.? The reality is we don't. It was actually created in 1979 as a political payoff by Jimmy Carter to the teachers union, the NEA, which happens to be the largest labor union in the country. He wanted their endorsement, and it's unconstitutional. The word education is not in the U.S. Constitution. It's therefore a violation of the 10th Amendment. It should be with the states. I'd say it should be with the parents, but at the very least, it should be sent back to the states. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, they created this department under the impression that it was going to close achievement gaps. It was going to improve student outcomes. But it's done neither of those things. It's only increased spending. It's spent nearly $3 trillion since the inception of the department. Outcomes haven't gotten better, but it's a money laundering operation for the Democrat Party and the teachers unions. That's why you have people like Randy Weingarten who are going on MSNBC and just fear-mongering every day of the week about, Randy even said in a couple of clips that she was angry about it, that she was really, really mad. She used those terms. I think she's afraid more than anything. She thinks her gravy train is coming to an end. She makes over $500,000 to trap other people's kids in her failure factories that we call public schools. But the jig is up, and the department's time is up. It has failed in its stated mission, and so we're taking steps to make education great again, return to a golden era of American education. And the fear mongering includes these things like students with special needs. They go straight to that, and the Democrats will say, well, what about the kids with special needs? But the reality is the proposal that's on the table moves all of those programs to the Department of Health and Human Services. So again, it's not as disruptive as what many libertarians would like it to be, but it's also not as disruptive as what the Democrats want you to believe it is, because they want to use this as a political tool to campaign against their political opponents, the Republicans, to hopefully, for them, win some seats on the issue. But the thing is, they're not contending with the facts. The proposal does, shift a lot of things around and then move the money back to the states, which you might have more money for education at the end of the day with this move, because you'll be wasting less of it on useless bureaucrats pushing paper hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C.
Hey folks, tired of the Fed being in control of your finances? Monetary Metals is revolutionizing how you can grow your wealth outside the system and gain greater control of your finances by growing your gold in ounces every single month, as I myself do in my Monetary Metals account. With Monetary Metals' gold leasing program, clients can earn 3% annual interest on their gold, paid every single month in more ounces of physical gold. Gold prices broke all-time highs in 2024. Now you can get your gold to work for you, generating additional interest income every month. The interest you earn is paid in ounces of physical gold or silver, which you get in addition to any price appreciation from gold and silver during the year. Join thousands of investors like me who are already earning interest income every month paid in gold and silver. This is a no-brainer for gold owners. Now is the time to secure your wealth and build your legacy in an asset the government can't inflate away. The Fed can print dollars, they can't print gold. Now's the time for you to do what I do. Start growing your wealth in ounces with Monetary Metals. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. Well, let me ask you then, if we're talking about a department that at one time managed student loans or had at least something to do with children with special needs or school lunches or something like that, if it had anything ever to do with any of that stuff, if that stuff is moved away, then what's left? Like what else was it up to that you would say we don't need them doing?
I mean, that's exactly right. They're not doing a bunch of anything. We're employing people, paying them six-figure salaries, thousands of people in Washington, D.C., and it's a cushy job. And they're not very useful. They're not improving American education. So that is it's more of a rhetorical question, right? If these things are being moved to other agencies, why do you need the department anymore? You don't. So this is I think with this death by 1,000 cuts approach, by moving things around as much as possibly can be done under the Constitution without Congress, maybe it'll make it an easier lift for Congress to actually vote on that bill to say, look, this really isn't changing anything, so we might as well nix the rest of it and delete the name Department of Education. We won't have it anymore. So I think that would be that. I mean, hopefully that's what it ends up happening. The other kind of thing that people have proposed is, well, maybe there's some things that can be done in Congress without a filibuster-proof majority if you get things done through this what they call the reconciliation process. But the Congress is limited in what it can do through the reconciliation process to certain things with taxes and whatnot. So I don't believe that eliminating the department altogether can be done that way. I mean, that was proposed as a way to get around that threshold and to only have a majority vote as opposed to a supermajority vote with 51 votes as opposed to 60. So at the end of the day, I think these kind of cuts these cuts from the inside will be what we see going forward. And it's all up in the air still about what's going to happen in Congress. But I think a lot of us kind of understand that the Democrats are probably not going to come along with the issue. And the Republicans aren't going to vote to end the filibuster either, which is something the Democrats had talked about when they were in power.
Yeah. So what does that mean then in terms of what Linda McMahon will be doing from now on? I mean, presiding over a much smaller institution? I mean, what exactly does this mean for her?
Yeah, I mean, I was hopeful she'd be able to get in there and just body slam it once and for all, but that's probably not going to happen in the short term. So yeah, facilitating movements of these vital functions to other areas. And so she's trying to work herself out of a job, basically, is the way that Trump put it during his inauguration speech in Washington, D.C. And there have been other good executive orders, too, that have kind of taken a step towards liberty, like things, before this one even came out, Trump was doing executive orders on school choice, for example. And the department had some discretionary funding. And so his order before this one to abolish it was for the department to find any discretionary funding to use that's not committed to other areas on school choice. And so I think that would be a step in the right direction. But they've also called to eliminate funding for DEI programs and grants, and so they're also doing this with university funding as well. So yeah, that's if it's going to be around, try to find ways to reduce wasteful spending. I think those are good moves, and I think that's what they're focusing a lot of their efforts on. That executive order on school choice had also mentioned military funding because a lot of the military families have federal funding already for their education. And so that was directing Pete Hegseth to find ways to make that funding fungible to use for school choice. And the federal government also oversees these Indian schools on the reservations. And so that there was a direction from Trump through the executive order to Doug Burgum, the Secretary of the Interior, to find ways to use that funding for school choice. So, but at the end of the day, even if we do get rid of the Federal Department of Education, I think that would be a huge step towards liberty, a step in the right direction. It's something that we need to fight to get done completely across the finish line. But it's not sufficient to improve American education altogether. You need bottom-up accountability too. People need to be able to vote with their feet. They need to get rid of these geographic monopolies called public school districts. And so the fight doesn't end with abolishing the department. You need people to have the power to choose their school. And that's why I think the state level fights for school choice are also very important. And it's where we're making the most progress. My home state of Texas might be the 16th state to go all in on school choice in the past 4 years. We have enough votes in the House for the first time in Texas history. So it's going to be a big win.
Well, let me ask you about an interesting trend. So you were saying that since 1979 and the creation of the Department of Education, that we haven't seen any educational metric improve appreciably, which is a pretty good argument against the institution. But there is, so in other words, if you look at a graph of, let's say, test scores over time or something, it's generally pretty flat. But there is, in these graphs, there is one feature of educational life in America that has shot up dramatically. And I think you know the one I'm talking about.
Well, it's two. One is spending. And so since 1970, per student spending has increased by 164% in real terms. Outcomes haven't gotten better. And then also administrative positions
That's what
have
I was
gone
thinking of.
through
Yes.
the roof.
Yeah, this is insane. And I don't understand why. I mean, I guess I do, but people who profess to be so concerned about education, they should be just as upset about this as you and I are. And oddly, they're not.
Well, the teachers should be pissed off about it too, because resources are scarce. If there's money going towards DEI officers and superintendents and additional principals, that's less money for the teachers who are already in the classroom doing a good job. And so if you look since 1970, while spending's gone up by over 160% in real terms, teacher salaries on average have only increased by 3% in real terms. They basically haven't changed over the past half century. And so, it raises the question of where's the money going? It goes towards these additional staffing surges. It's become more of a jobs program for adults than an education initiative for kids. And that's because the union bosses benefit from having more people in a couple of ways. One, is they have a larger voting bloc. They have more political influence to fight for all their political pet projects and to lobby at the Capitol and state legislatures. But it also helps them in terms of revenue. If you have more people in the buildings, that means more dues-paying members, which is great for people like Randy Weingarten who want more power, but it's horrible for the members on the ground that are already in the classroom doing a good job, because that means that money's not going to them. It's not going to the classroom. It's going towards bloat. And the more that teachers learn about this phenomena, I think the better it will be for the school choice movement, because sometimes people think of the school choice battle as one being between parents and the school system, which includes the employees. But the employees get screwed by the system too, because their employer is a monopoly that has no incentive to spend money wisely. There's no competition in the labor market when it comes to K-12 education. And so the teachers are getting the short end of the stick, just like the parents.
Folks, I'm sure you'll agree with me that a lot of us feel pressed for time every day, and that sometimes when you're pressed for time, you make bad eating choices. Those bad eating choices are so convenient and easy. Well, I've got something else that's convenient and easy for you, and it's better than those choices. Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're ready to heat and eat in just a few minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor meals arrive fresh and fully prepared, not frozen. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. And it's lunch, it's smoothies, it's breakfasts, it's grab-and-go snacks, it's dinners, it's everything. So reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat, so you won't be tempted to make the wrong choices. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/FactorPodcast and use code FactorPodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FactorPodcast at factormeals.com/FactorPodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Are you familiar with the proposal that's been thrown out by Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio that would tie, I think, compensation for teachers to performance? And if so, what do you think about that?
I think it's a pretty good idea. It's not a perfect solution. I think you also need school choice. The good news in Ohio is they have a universal school choice program on the books. They're one of the 15 states that have passed a universal school choice program in the past 4 years. So they're leading the way when it comes to education freedom on the school choice front. And I think if you have that in place, it sets you up to structure a pay-for-performance program the right way in the public schools. I've been skeptical of them before because I don't want to incentivize teaching to the test.
Yeah.
I don't want to incentivize. I think you need to have a check and balance. And I think when you have school choice, that gives the system an incentive to structure their pay for performance the right way. So I think in Ohio, it would be okay to do that. And at the end of the day, the unions fight against merit pay every step of the way. And so if Randy's fighting against it, it's probably a fantastic idea to go forward with it, because the unions protect the worst common denominator teachers. And merit pay would benefit the teachers who are doing the best. It wouldn't be perfect because, and you can make this argument about, companies that have merit pay. It's like, well, yeah, maybe they get it wrong, from here and there, but that doesn't mean you don't try to do it to the best of your ability, and that you don't incentivize performance at all. Because some people will have raised the question of, well, how do we know what a good teacher is? And it's like, when you try to get into those details, it's like, okay, well, yeah, test scores may be part of it, but everybody kind of knows who the best teacher is, right? So you could use heuristics and reviews and other things, and you can make that same argument against merit pay in the private sector. You can say, well, how do we know who the best employee is? And then you can get into these fine, detailed arguments about how, well, maybe it's not perfect, but just because it isn't perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't try to incentivize performance. Like you could say, oh, this other guy at the company got a raise, but he wasn't actually the best. but that doesn't mean we should not have, bonuses and pay for performance at all, just because sometimes we get it wrong. So similarly with education, I think this is a great proposal by Vivek, and I'm more of like a let's let 1,000 flowers bloom type of guy, and I think the market figures these things out. But the reality is, we still do have a public school system, and we got to figure out what to do with it. And I think this is one proposal that is a tweak that's not perfect, but a step in the right direction.
Yeah. I can imagine, just trying to put myself in the shoes of some of these people, being a teacher in a really troubled school, and the students are not getting parental support. The teachers are not getting parental support. The students are unprepared. They have the wrong attitude. They're troublemakers. And my salary is going to be judged on the basis of how they do. There's only so much that's within my control. I could be exerting myself to the highest degree possible. And according to Vivek, I'm still doing a rotten job.
Yeah, so that's why I say you got to implement it in the right way. So there are, in education research, they have this thing called the value-added methodology, where they try to stick into an equation all the background characteristics of the kids, and to try to control for their initial test scores, and so like you're not penalized for having the less advantaged kids. And there's all sorts of problems that can arise by trying to centrally plan things this way. But again, it is better than just saying, oh, well, here's the average test score. And if you have kids that are, from a difficult background, that you're going to get penalized for that. I think that would be the wrong way to go. So there's better and worse ways to structure these types of incentive programs. And, I haven't delved into this research in a while, but I know there's better ways to do it with, but again, do we have a lot of confidence that the public schools are going to be able to figure out these complicated methodologies? I don't know. But hopefully, there are these kind of understanding that people know like who is doing a good job, even if their average test scores are low. So it would depend on how the school structures it.
So the question then becomes, what, if anything, can we do to improve student outcomes, to get those lines from flat to increasing? Or at least if they're going to be flat, have them be at a higher baseline. Yeah. So I wonder, like, for example, they tried Head Start, but Head Start has not had impressive results at all. That the general consensus is that even if for a few months it seems like there's a marginal improvement, that's gone by the next academic year.
Yeah, exactly.
So what, is there anything, or is it really a matter of this is a cultural problem? Like we need parents who care about it and prioritize it. What are we facing here?
Yeah, so I do think the one-size-fits-all government school system does create a culture of dependency on that system. And it also, I think, facilitates helplessness in parents, that you're forced to pay for the system. You're compelled to send your kids to basically the government school that you're assigned to. If it's crap, then too bad, right? And so a lot of parents, they don't even, that it's depressing to think about, right? And when you poll parents and ask them how they like their public school, a lot of them say they do like it, but I think that's a form of Stockholm syndrome, because that would require you to admit that you're sending your kid to a school that might be actively harming your own child. And so, when you ask people what they think about the public school system overall, it's pretty consistently they don't have a lot of confidence in it. But when they ask about it's kind of like when you ask people if they like Congress, they all say they hate Congress. But when you ask people if they like their congressperson, they say, oh yeah, my congressperson is fine. But I think it's more of a personal issue when it comes to the school system and you're talking about someone's own child. But when it comes to, making things better, I think school choice would, at least at the margins, give those families more of an incentive to be involved in their child's education. And so school choice isn't a silver bullet. Competition will help things at the margins, improve the public schools. It's not going to fix every single family and make sure everybody's doing a phenomenal job with their children, but it will nudge people in that direction. And so I think as economists, we got to think about things that will take us towards the utopia, even if it doesn't get us all the way there. And I don't think pre-K is the answer. I mean, we've seen the latest experiment came from Tennessee, a random assignment study. You compared the people who won the lottery to the people and who got pre-K to the people who lost the lottery and had to, they stayed home basically and didn't do pre-K. And that was from Tennessee, and they found negative effects actually through the end of sixth grade, which was the end of the study period. Peer-reviewed study found that pre-K actually hurt kids through the end of sixth grade. And so the theory is that the only thing I could come up with is, well, maybe parents have a little bit of a competitive advantage at raising their own children and disciplining them at home than when you send them to this pre-K/daycare thing with people that don't care about the kids as much. And which raises the question of why would people voluntarily choose something like that? Well, when you're provided, the funding to do so at the pre-K level, at the margins, some people who would be better off raising their own children would now have an incentive to send them off elsewhere. And then later on in life, that might actually hurt the kids. So I don't think pre-K is the solution at all. School choice is necessary, but not sufficient. I think we also have to do things to tweak the public schools. So merit pay could be one of those things that could help at the margins, depending on if it's done right. You got to show up at your school board meetings. You want to be involved in those local elections too. I mean, the school districts are passing bonds left and right, throwing more money at the problem. That's not going to fix anything. So there's things like you can make these off-cycle school board elections aligned with the general election so that you get people other than the special interests showing up at these elections. So there's a lot of things we can do at the flanks to improve the system, but there's no one thing I can point to as this is the magic solution, because there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs, and we can move in the direction of improving education. And at the end of the day, Tom, I think a lot of this battle about improving test scores misses the whole point of the school system. I think the point of education should be to raise your child in values that you want them to have. And focusing too much on test scores misses a lot of just normal upbringing of children. I mean, we all basically homeschool our kids before kindergarten. I mean, if we were forced to send our child to the government from birth in a compulsory way, like we are with kindergarten through 12th grade, people would think that we needed the government to learn how to walk and to learn how to talk. The reality is we don't. And a lot of the things we learn in government schools, we forget it anyway. And we would probably learn more of those things if we weren't compelled to go to an assigned government school. And so when you have school choice, at least, and these problems are inherent in all types of factory model schooling, that could be in private schools too. At least if you have a choice, you can figure out who's going to help you raise your kids. Is it the assigned government school worker, or is it going to be a private community that you're aligned with? And so school choice respects that outcome that isn't easily measured, which is, are you going to be able to raise your kid in a way that you're happy with, and that is going to make them a better person, that's going to make them more likely to be successful later on in life, less likely to go to jail, less likely to be involved in gangs. And I think that's that gets missed in the conversation all too often when we just focus on math and reading.
How do people follow you?
You can follow me on X. It's at DeAngelis Corey. And if you want to check out the book, it's The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. It's on Amazon right now for, I think it's like 30% off right now. And it also hit the USA Today bestseller rankings.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll have links to those things at, let's see, what episode did I say this? I'm going to go double check. I don't want to make this mistake.
It's in the 2000s, 26, 23 maybe or something.
Yeah, I think it was 20. It is 26, 23. Who even knows anymore? But TomWoods.com/2623 is where I'll have these links also in the video description. I follow you on social media. I find it interesting to see not only your takes on things, but also the way you yourself have become at the center of this, that you get attacked, you get praised, nobody's neutral on Corey DeAngelis.
That's right.
So
if you're catching a flack, that means you're over the target.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
What else could it mean?
We're winning on the issue, and if we weren't winning on the issue, no one would really care all that much. And we threaten the status quo more than we ever have before. So we're on the right side of history, Tom, and that's too bad for the unions who are crying about it right now.
Well, to be honest with you, Corey, I'm used to losing on everything. I'm accustomed to it. So yeah, I think when indeed you find yourself subjected to the kind, even from Randy Weingarten herself, the kinds of attacks from those people, that has to mean you're some kind of threat. Otherwise, they would certainly consider it to be in their interest just to ignore you. It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a good thing to get to highlight your existence, because by accident they're going to introduce you to sympathizers who had never heard of you before. So it does mean you're doing good and important work. And it's also quite astonishing that we've lived through a period of time in which very rapidly you have seen the implementation of some of the things that you've called for. And again, I know that doesn't sound like a big deal to some people, but unless you've been living on Mars, it actually has been very hard for us to get our ideas implemented. And then very, very rapidly it happened. So, this is a very interesting time to be Corey DeAngelis, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. I think Randy also at her American Federation of Teachers conference had on her main stage keynote talk, she had pictures of her 3 primary enemies on the screen behind her. This was last year in 2024. And first, she had a shot of Betsy DeVos, Chris Rufo, and me.
Wow.
And they basically putting a target on our backs, I guess. But too bad. It's not working.
That is amazing to be in the top 3. Tremendous.
I'll take it.
All right. Well, so Corey DeAngelis, it's DeAngelis. So at DeAngelis
Yes.
Corey, Corey. Go follow him there. Thanks so much, Corey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom.
And
Good
pick
talking to
up
you.
The Parent Revolution also, by the way, in parentheses. Don't forget to get that on Amazon. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.